Boy revives after 10 minutes of death. His warning from heaven stuns the entire church. The stained glass windows of St. Michael's Cathedral cast rainbow shadows across the worn wooden floors as 8-year-old David Thompson collapsed near the altar. His small body crumpled like a rag doll, the soccer ball he'd been clutching rolling away across the polished stone. David's Sarah Thompson's scream pierced the Sunday afternoon quiet, echoing off ancient walls that had witnessed countless prayers but never a mother's such raw desperation. For 10 minutes, David's heart refused to beat. For 10 minutes, a community knelt in prayer. Then, with a gasp that seemed to draw breath from heaven itself, David's eyes flew open. "Mom," he whispered, "I need to tell everyone what I saw." Take a moment to let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. Your like means a lot. Hit that button before diving into this extraordinary story of faith and miracles. Sarah Thompson stared at the reflection in her cracked bathroom mirror, adjusting her worn Sunday dress for the third time. At 34, her face carried the gentle lines of both smiles and worries, each etched by years of single motherhood. The small apartment above Miller's grocery store wasn't much, but it had been home since David's father abandoned them 6 years ago, leaving nothing but a hastily scribbled note and a mountain of unpaid bills. Working 2 jobs as a waitress at the local diner and a night cleaner at offices downtown, Sarah managed to keep David in his Catholic school, St. Michael's Academy, though the tuition payment often meant skipping meals herself. The church's financial aid program, meant for underprivileged families, somehow always seemed to benefit the moderately comfortable rather than those truly in need. Still, Sarah kept her head high and her faith stronger. David, despite their circumstances, radiated an inexplicable joy that drew people to him like moths to a flame. His big brown eyes and gentle smile made him popular among the church elderly, who would slip him candies after Sunday service. At 8 years old, he was already an altar boy, taking his duties with a seriousness that amused and touched the congregation. Every Saturday he would polish the brass candlesticks until they gleamed, refusing help because it's my special job for God. But life at St. Michael's wasn't always kind to the Thompsons. The whispers followed them like shadows during coffee hour, in parent-teacher meetings, even during communion. Poor Sarah, they'd say, not quite under their breath, if only she'd made better choices. The prestigious Parker family, whose donations kept the church's lights on, made it clear through subtle gestures and not-so-subtle seating arrangements that the Thompsons belonged at the back of the church, with the other charity cases. Father Michael Anderson, the head priest, presented a complex figure in their lives. Publicly, he preached about charity and acceptance, his powerful sermons moving many to tears. Yet, when Sarah approached him about the possibility of a larger financial aid package for David's tuition, his warm smile never quite reached his eyes as he explained the church's limited resources. Meanwhile, the Parker's daughter received a full scholarship for being an exceptional student, despite David's consistently higher grades. Sarah found allies in unexpected places. Mrs. Rodriguez, the church cleaner who would share her homemade tamales, Mr. Jenkins, the elderly groundskeeper who taught David how to tend the church garden, and Sister Mary Catherine, a young nun who quietly slipped extra groceries into Sarah's car when things got particularly tight. These small kindnesses kept her faith alive even on the darkest days. David, somehow understanding more than a child his age should, never complained about their hand-me-down clothes or the missed school field trips. Instead, he threw himself into serving at the church with an enthusiasm that both warmed and worried Sarah's heart. "Mom," he'd say, helping her fold laundry in their tiny living room, "did you know that Jesus was poor too? Sister Mary Catherine says that means he understands us better than anyone." The church community watched the Thompson family with a mixture of pity, judgment, and occasional admiration. Sarah's unwavering dignity in the face of hardship and her son's pure-hearted devotion to the church created an uncomfortable mirror for those who claimed to follow Christ's teachings while maintaining their social hierarchies. Little did they know that through David, God was about to send them all a message that would shatter their carefully constructed worlds and force them to confront the true meaning of faith, love, and community. St. Michael's Cathedral stood as a towering testament to old money and older faith in downtown Hartford. Its Gothic spires pierced the sky like accusing fingers, while its immaculate gardens, maintained by generous donations from the Parker family, served as a weekly backdrop for the congregation's social positioning. Inside these hallowed walls, an invisible but rigid hierarchy governed every interaction, from seating arrangements to committee appointments. Father Michael Anderson, at 55, had mastered the art of appearing humble while wielding considerable influence. His carefully styled silver hair and tailored clerical garments spoke of refinement, while his sermons about humility drew tears from the wealthy patrons. He'd arrived at St. Michael's 15 years ago, transforming it from a struggling parish into a prestigious religious institution. Under his leadership, donation revenues tripled, though the church's outreach programs mysteriously remained underfunded. The Parker family, led by James Parker and his wife Elizabeth, occupied the unofficial throne of St. Michael's social hierarchy. Their family had been pillars of the church for 3 generations, their name adorning plaques on everything from the new wing to the garden benches. James, a successful real estate developer, headed the church's financial committee, while Elizabeth chaired every major social event. Their daughter, Madison, enjoyed privileges that came with being a Parker, including a coveted scholarship despite her mediocre academic performance. Below the Parkers orbited a constellation of wealthy families, the Whitneys, the Caldwells, and the Richardsons, all vying for social influence through generous donations and committee positions. They formed an impenetrable circle during coffee hour, their designer clothes and practiced laughs creating a barrier as effective as the church's stone walls. Their children attended the same private schools, their families vacationed at the same exclusive resorts, and their opinions carried weight in every church decision. The middle tier consisted of professionals, doctors, lawyers, and business owners who strived to climb the social ladder while maintaining a careful distance from those below them. They volunteered strategically, choosing visible roles that put them in proximity to the upper echelon while avoiding the actual heavy lifting of church work. At the bottom existed the service class, the cleaners, gardeners, and maintenance staff, along with struggling single parents and elderly pensioners who received the church's charity with carefully measured gratitude. They occupied the back pews, accepted hand-me-downs from church rummage sales, and provided the subjects for Father Anderson's sermons about helping the less fortunate. The church staff reflected this stratification. Sister Mary Catherine, despite her family's wealthy background, chose to work with the underprivileged, earning subtle disapproval from the upper tiers. Mrs. Rodriguez, the church cleaner, knew secrets she'd gleaned from empty offices and late-night meetings, but kept them locked behind a quiet smile. Mr. Jenkins, the elderly groundskeeper, watched it all with knowing eyes as he tended his beloved gardens. The annual church charity gala epitomized this social structure, with tables priced to ensure proper segregation. The Parkers' table, centrally located near the podium, cost $10,000, while the community tables in the back went for $50 per seat, marketed as inclusive options for less fortunate members. This was the world David Thompson navigated with innocent grace, unaware that his presence as an altar boy had sparked heated debates in private committee meetings. Some argued it set a concerning precedent, while others saw it as a perfect example of the church's charitable mission. Father Anderson had allowed it, recognizing the positive optics of a poor but devout child serving at the altar, though he carefully scheduled David for early morning masses rather than the prestigious Sunday main service. Little did any of them suspect that through this seemingly insignificant child, God was about to shake the very foundations of their carefully constructed social edifice, forcing them to confront the vast gap between their professed faith and their lived values. That Sunday began like any other at St. Michael's Cathedral. The September morning air carried the first hints of autumn as David Thompson arrived early, his worn dress shoes clicking against the stone steps. He'd convinced his mother to let him come before the main service to help Mr. Jenkins prepare the grounds for the church's annual harvest festival, though the real reason was the small soccer ball tucked into his backpack. The church grounds were quiet at 7 a.m., peaceful in a way they never were during regular service hours. Mr. Jenkins, already at work among his beloved flower beds, gave David a knowing wink as the boys slipped behind the cathedral to the small courtyard, their secret spot, where David could practice soccer without fear of judgment from the wealthier children. "Just an hour," Mr. Jenkins called out. "Then we've got work to do." David nodded enthusiastically, already pulling out his treasured ball, a birthday gift from Sister Mary Catherine, who'd noticed his longing looks at the expensive sports equipment the other altar boys carried. The morning sun painted the cathedral's shadow across the courtyard as David moved with natural grace, his bare feet shoes carefully set aside to prevent wear dancing across the dew-damp grass. Each kick, each turn, each small victory over gravity was accompanied by whispered commentary. In his mind, he was playing in the World Cup, representing not just his country but St. Michael's itself. As the morning progressed, more church staff arrived. Mrs. Rodriguez paused at a window, smiling at David's obvious joy. Sister Mary Catherine, arriving for early morning prayers, watched for a moment before heading inside, her heart heavy with the knowledge of yesterday's committee meeting where the Parkers had once again blocked funding for the children's sports program. At 8:30 a.m., Sarah Thompson arrived, her waitress uniform hidden under a modest dress. She'd managed to swap shifts at the diner to attend the main service, a rare treat for both her and David. Finding her son in the courtyard, she watched with quiet pride as he performed an impressive series of kicks. "Mom," David called out, his face flushed with exercise and excitement. "Watch this." He attempted a complex move he'd seen on YouTube, using the cathedral wall as a backboard. The ball ricocheted perfectly, but as David moved to catch it, something changed. His usually bright face suddenly went pale. Sarah saw it happen as if in slow motion. David's small body swayed, his eyes rolling back. The soccer ball bounced away forgotten as he crumpled to the ground, his head making a terrible dull sound against the ancient stones. Sarah's scream shattered the morning peace. She ran to her son, her shoes abandoned mid-stride. Mr. Jenkins dropped his gardening tools with a clatter, rushing to help. Sister Mary Catherine appeared from within the church, her efficient hands already pulling out a phone to call emergency services. Father Anderson, preparing for the morning service, heard the commotion and emerged to find a small crowd gathering. David lay motionless on the ground, his mother cradling his head, her tears falling on his still face. The priest moved forward, his presence creating a circle of space around the scene. The next minute stretched like hours, no pulse, no breath. Sarah's prayers mixed with sobs as Sister Mary Catherine performed CPR. The gathered crowd grew, early arrivals for the main service drawn by the commotion. The Parkers stood at the edge of the courtyard, Elizabeth Parker's manicured hand covering her mouth in shock. 10 minutes. 10 eternal minutes of desperation, prayer, and helplessness. The paramedics had just turned the corner into the church grounds when it happened. David's body jerked violently, his eyes flying open as he drew in a rattling breath that seemed to echo off the cathedral walls. But something was different. His eyes, usually warm brown and full of childish joy, now held a depth that sent chills through those nearest to him. He looked at his mother, then at Father Anderson, before whispering words that would change everything I was with Jesus. He showed me what's been happening in his house. The paramedics arrived to find a scene of barely controlled chaos. The gathered crowd parted like the Red Sea as they rushed through with their equipment, their professional calm a stark contrast to the emotional tension saturating the air. David, now conscious but disoriented, remained in his mother's arms, his eyes moving between faces in the crowd with an unsettling intensity. "BP's low but stable," one paramedic announced, wrapping the blood pressure cuff around David's small arm. Her partner radioed ahead to Hartford General, describing the situation: 8-year-old male, cardiac arrest with spontaneous revival, currently conscious and responsive. The clinical terms echoed strangely against the cathedral walls, mixing with the murmured prayers of the growing congregation. Sarah Thompson rode in the ambulance, clutching her son's hand as if it were a lifeline. Behind them, Father Anderson announced the morning service would be delayed, though most of the congregation had already decided to follow the ambulance to the hospital. The Parkers led this procession in their Mercedes, Elizabeth Parker already organizing a prayer vigil via her phone. At Hartford General, Dr. James Matthews, the attending physician, found himself facing an unusual case. The boy's vitals were now surprisingly stable for someone who had been clinically dead for 10 minutes. More puzzling were his periods of extreme clarity between bouts of what seemed like intense focus on things no one else could see. "The angels were crying," David said during one examination, his voice carrying an authority that made the nurse drop her clipboard. "They were crying because of the missing money, the money that was supposed to help people like Tommy." Tommy Rogers, a young parishioner with cerebral palsy, had been denied financial assistance for a new wheelchair by the church committee just last week. This fact wasn't widely known, certainly not to David, yet he spoke of it with detailed accuracy. The hospital corridor outside David's room became an impromptu chapel. Church members filled the chairs and lined the walls, their Sunday best looking increasingly rumpled as hours passed. Sister Mary Catherine organized a rotation of prayer groups while Mrs. Rodriguez distributed coffee and her emergency stash of rosary beads. Dr. Matthews ordered a battery of tests, EKG, MRI, blood work, all of which came back remarkably normal. Medically speaking, he told Sarah privately, "Your son appears perfectly healthy. What happened this morning? I can't explain it." He hesitated before adding, "But in 30 years of medicine, I've learned there are some things science can't explain." As evening approached, the hospital staff made an exception to visiting hours, allowing the gathered church members to briefly see David. They came in small groups, many leaving in tears, though not all from sorrow. David spoke to each visitor with uncanny insight, mentioning private pains, secret struggles, and in some cases hidden transgressions. To Mrs. Whitney, he spoke of her private battle with alcohol that not even her husband knew about. To young Madison Parker, he mentioned the test answers she'd stolen from her teacher's desk. But it was his words to Father Anderson that caused the most stir. "Jesus showed me the books," David said when the priest approached his bedside. "The real books, not the ones you show everyone." Father Anderson's face went pale, but David continued, his child's voice carrying the weight of divine authority. "He wants his house cleaned, Father. He wants his money to help his people." As night fell over Hartford General, the crowd slowly dispersed, leaving behind a changed atmosphere. Some left in tears of revelation, others in quiet contemplation, and a few, notably Father Anderson and the Parkers, in barely concealed distress. Sarah remained by her son's bedside, watching as he finally drifted into peaceful sleep, wondering what tomorrow would bring. In the quiet of the hospital room, with only the steady beep of monitors as company, she noticed David's lips moving in his sleep. Leaning closer, she heard him whisper, "It's only the beginning, Mom. Jesus says the truth needs to come out." If this story has touched your heart so far, a simple like would mean the world to us. Your support helps us share more stories of faith, courage, and divine intervention. Let's continue with David's extraordinary journey, where heaven's truth is about to shake the foundations of St. Michael's Cathedral. Copier. David was discharged from the hospital on Monday morning, but the whispers of his experience had already spread through St. Michael's Parish like wildfire. By Tuesday, when he first spoke publicly about his vision, the church hall was packed beyond capacity, with people standing in the aisles and spilling out into the foyer. Sarah sat beside her son on the makeshift stage, her hand protectively covering his as he faced the sea of expectant faces. Sister Mary Catherine had organized the gathering, despite Father Anderson's subtle attempts to delay it. The priest himself stood at the back, his usual commanding presence somehow diminished. "Heaven isn't like the pictures," David began, his clear voice carrying to every corner of the hushed room. "It's more like being inside pure love." He described an overwhelming light that didn't hurt his eyes, and a peace so deep it made earthly contentment seem shallow in comparison. But then his voice changed, taking on a gravity that seemed impossible from an 8-year-old. "Jesus showed me things," he continued. "He showed me his tears." David's eyes found Father Anderson in the crowd. "He showed me the money that was supposed to help Tommy get his wheelchair. It's in a special account, Father. The one you said didn't exist." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Elizabeth Parker shifted uncomfortably in her front row seat as David went on. "I saw the real books, the ones in the bottom drawer of your desk under the false bottom. Jesus showed me how the numbers don't match what you tell everyone." Father Anderson's face remained impassive, but those nearest to him noticed his hands trembling slightly. "James Parker, I stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is preposterous. The boy is clearly traumatized from his experience. We shouldn't be entertaining these hallucinations." But David wasn't finished. With tears rolling down his cheeks, he described how Jesus had shown him the true purpose of his church. "The money wasn't supposed to be for new marble floors," he said, his voice breaking. "It was meant for people like old Mrs. Martinez who can't afford her heart medicine, and for the homeless shelter that got closed down because you said we didn't have funds to support it." The room erupted in chaos. Some people stood up shouting while others fell to their knees in prayer. Mrs. Rodriguez crossed herself repeatedly, whispering, I knew it," in Spanish. Sister Mary Catherine moved closer to David and his mother, her presence both protective and supporting. "There's more," David said, his voice somehow cutting through the noise. "Jesus showed me all the prayers that never got answered because the money for help was moved away. He showed me the names of everyone who was turned away." He began listing names, dates, and exact dollar amounts that had been denied or diverted. In the back of the room, Mr. Jenkins noticed Father Anderson quietly slipping out a side door. The old groundskeeper's eyes narrowed as he watched James Parker follow shortly after. David's revelations continued, becoming more specific and devastating with each word. He spoke of offshore accounts, of falsified charity records, of years of systematic abuse of church funds. But more than the financial details, he spoke of the spiritual cost, the broken trust, the lost faith, the prayers that went unanswered while money meant for charity bought luxury cars and vacation homes. Jesus wasn't angry, David said finally, his young face streaked with tears. He was heartbroken. He showed me how much he loves everyone here, even those who took the money. He just wants his house to be clean again. He wants his children to be taken care of. The meeting ended in a stunned silence broken only by muffled sobs and whispered prayers. As people filed out, their faces showed a mix of emotions: shock, anger, betrayal, but also something else: hope. Many stopped to touch David's shoulder or kiss his forehead, as though seeking a blessing. Sarah held her son close as the hall emptied, feeling both fierce pride and terrible fear. She knew that with these revelations, their lives would never be the same. Sister Mary Catherine approached them, her face grave. "You'll need protection," she said quietly. "Both of you. This isn't just about money, it's about power, and those who have it won't give it up easily." As if to confirm her words, they could hear raised voices from the church office where Father Anderson and James Parker had retreated. The sound of a slamming door echoed through the building, followed by the screech of expensive car tires on pavement. David looked up at his mother, his eyes showing wisdom far beyond his years. "Don't be afraid, Mom," he said softly. "Jesus told me this had to happen. He said the truth will hurt at first, but it's the only way to heal his church." The days following David's revelation split St. Michael's Parish as cleanly as an axe splitting wood. The church, once a unified body, fractured into distinct camps, each claiming to represent true faith. The division manifested physically during Sunday services, with different groups clustering in separate sections of the cathedral, the empty pews between them like no man's land in a spiritual war. The Parker faction, comprising the church's wealthiest and most influential members, mounted an aggressive defense. James Parker, I held private meetings in his mansion, crafting a narrative that painted David's experience as a trauma-induced delusion. "Children are suggestible," Elizabeth Parker repeated at her weekly tea gatherings, her voice dripping with practiced concern. "We're only hurting the boy by encouraging these fantasies." Father Anderson, visibly aged by stress, walked a precarious line. In his sermons, he spoke increasingly of forgiveness and the dangers of false witness, while carefully avoiding any direct reference to David's accusations. His homilies became masterpieces of deflection, weaving biblical passages about the unreliability of human perception with calls for unity and discretion. Meanwhile, a resistance formed around Sister Mary Catherine and the church's working-class members. Mrs. Rodriguez began speaking openly about mysterious late-night meetings she'd witnessed while cleaning, and Mr. Jenkins shared stories of suspicious deliveries to Father Anderson's private garage. Tommy Rogers' parents went public with documentation of their denied wheelchair request, including emails showing funds had been available. The middle-class families found themselves torn, many struggling between their social aspirations and their conscience. The Whitneys stopped attending services entirely. The Caldwells switched to a different parish, while the Richardsons surprised everyone by firmly aligning with Sister Mary Catherine's group. Sarah Thompson faced increasing pressure at work. Anonymous complaints about her service appeared at the diner, and her night cleaning contracts mysteriously canceled one by one. Yet for every act of retaliation there came unexpected support. Church members she'd never spoken to slipped grocery gift cards into her purse. An envelope containing 3 months' rent appeared in her mailbox, signed simply "A Friend in Faith." David himself became both a symbol and a target. Some parishioners treated him with reverence, crossing themselves when he passed. Others avoided him entirely, hustling their children away as though his divine experience might be contagious. Madison Parker and her friends took to calling him Heaven Boy in the school hallways, the nickname spreading like a virus through the student body. The local media caught wind of the story, but the Parker family's influence kept it largely confined to whispered rumors. However, they couldn't control social media, where videos of David's testimony began circulating among religious communities nationwide. The comments sections became battlegrounds between believers and skeptics, each side growing more entrenched in their position. One Sunday, 3 weeks after David's revelation, the tension finally erupted into public confrontation. During communion, Elizabeth Parker loudly refused to take the host from Sister Mary Catherine, demanding Father Anderson instead. The incident sparked a heated argument in the church vestibule, with members of both factions hurling accusations and Bible verses at each other. Through it all, David maintained a strange serenity that unnerved even his supporters. When asked about the growing conflict, he would simply say, "Jesus told me this would happen." The truth has to hurt before it can heal. His teachers reported that while his grades remained excellent, he spent more time alone, often found praying in the school chapel during lunch breaks. The diocese couldn't ignore the situation forever. Bishop Roberts announced an official investigation, though many noted his close personal friendship with James Parker. The investigation team, handpicked by the bishop, arrived with briefcases and laptops, their presence adding another layer of tension to the already strained atmosphere. Sarah watched it all with growing concern, torn between maternal pride and fear for her son's safety. Late at night, she would find David sitting by his window, staring at the cathedral spires visible in the distance. "Mom," he said one evening, "Jesus showed me something else in heaven, something I haven't told anyone yet. He said to wait for the right time." The weight of unspoken truth hung over St. Michael's like storm clouds gathering before a hurricane. Both sides knew this was just the beginning, that somewhere in the church's records, in hidden accounts and secret meetings, lay evidence that would either vindicate David's vision or destroy his credibility forever. As autumn deepened into winter, St. Michael's Cathedral stood as a house divided, its Gothic architecture looming over a congregation that no longer knew who or what to believe. The only certainty was that nothing would ever be the same, and that somewhere in heaven Jesus was still watching, waiting for his truth to emerge. The first signs of systematic investigation came from an unexpected source. Janet Richardson, a quiet accountant who had attended St. Michael's for 20 years, began spending her evenings poring over publicly available church records. Her small home office transformed into an investigation headquarters, walls covered with financial statements and donation records spanning the past decade. "These numbers don't add up," she whispered to Sister Mary Catherine one Wednesday after evening Mass. She'd discovered a pattern of discrepancies between reported charitable giving and actual disbursements. Large donations earmarked for community outreach had vanished into vaguely labeled administrative accounts, while maintenance costs for the church seemed grossly inflated. The situation escalated when anonymous threatening letters began appearing in Sarah Thompson's mailbox. "Keep your boy quiet," one read, "or accidents happen." Sarah's hands trembled as she showed them to Detective Michael Cooper, a recently retired police officer and longtime parishioner who had taken a personal interest in the case. Cooper's weathered face darkened as he examined the letters, carefully cut magazine letters. "This isn't amateur work," he noted, carefully bagging the evidence. "Someone's trying hard to make this look random, but there's a pattern here." He began his own investigation, drawing on decades of law enforcement experience and a network of still active contacts. Support emerged from unexpected quarters. Mrs. Eleanor Whitney, despite her husband's objections, provided copies of financial committee meeting minutes she'd secretly kept over the years. These revealed heated debates about fund allocation, with Father Anderson and James Parker consistently overriding objections to questionable expenditures. The breakthrough came through Tommy Rogers' parents. Digging through their correspondence about the wheelchair funding, they discovered emails accidentally copied to their address, containing coded references to special accounts and alternative investments. But these emails led to a trail of offshore transactions, carefully hidden but not completely erased. Mr. Jenkins, who had worked at St. Michael's for over 3 decades, began sharing stories of late-night meetings and suspicious document disposals. He described watching Father Anderson and James Parker burning papers in the church's old incinerator, their faces illuminated by flames on countless early mornings. Meanwhile, David continued having what he called new memories from his heavenly experience. Each recollection provided another piece of the puzzle: account numbers, dates of transactions, names of shell companies. The specificity and accuracy of these details stunned even the skeptics, as each piece of information proved verifiable through painstaking research. Sister Mary Catherine coordinated these various threads of investigation, her small office becoming a clearinghouse for information. Her religious training in organizing parish records proved invaluable as she helped create a comprehensive timeline of the financial misconduct. The parish secretary, Martha Collins, who had worked at St. Michael's for 25 years, finally broke her silence. With trembling hands, she provided copies of dual ledgers. She'd been forced to maintain one for official church records, another tracking the actual flow of funds. Her testimony opened a floodgate of evidence. As the investigation deepened, more church employees came forward. The maintenance staff spoke of renovations to Father Anderson's private residence, paid for with funds meant for homeless shelters. The youth ministry coordinator revealed how money for after-school programs had been diverted to luxurious retreats for select committee members. David watched these developments with a calm that belied his age. "Jesus showed me all of this," he would say when shown new evidence, "but he also showed me something else, something bigger that hasn't come out yet." The investigation took an unexpected turn when an elderly church member, terminally ill in hospice care, requested to speak with Detective Cooper. Harold Matthews, once the church's accountant in the early days of Father Anderson's tenure, provided a deathbed statement detailing the origins of the financial manipulation. His testimony implicated not just Father Anderson and the Parkers, but hinted at corruption reaching into the highest levels of the diocese. Janet Richardson's analysis revealed a sophisticated money laundering operation disguised as charitable giving. Wealthy donors would make tax-deductible contributions to the church, which would then be cycled through various accounts before returning to the donors through offshore entities, effectively making their donations cost-free while depriving the church of intended charitable funds. The evidence mounted in Sister Mary Catherine's office like a rising tide. Each new revelation seemed to confirm another detail from David's divine vision. Yet everyone involved sensed they were still only scratching the surface of a much larger conspiracy. The ripple effects of the investigation tore through St. Michael's community like a spiritual tsunami. Longtime friendships fractured, business relationships crumbled, and even family ties strained under the weight of divided loyalties. The Parker family's once ironclad social influence began showing cracks, as former allies distanced themselves from the growing scandal. Sarah Thompson faced escalating harassment at work. Regular customers at the diner suddenly became hostile, leaving no tips and making loud comments about attention-seeking single mothers. Her night cleaning job terminated her contract, citing budget cuts, though she later learned the Parkers had threatened to withdraw their business from the cleaning company. Sister Mary Catherine helped her secure temporary work at a neighboring parish's office, but the loss of income struck hard. David's life at school transformed dramatically. Teachers who had once praised his academic performance now found fault with his work. Madison Parker and her circle of friends orchestrated a sophisticated campaign of exclusion, turning classroom activities and recess into exercises in isolation. Yet a small group of students, mostly from working-class families, formed a protective circle around him, drawn by what they called his special light. The parish itself split into three distinct factions. The believers, led by Sister Mary Catherine and the Richardsons, openly supported David and called for a complete investigation. The Loyalists, headed by the Parkers and their wealthy allies, staunchly defended Father Anderson and the current church leadership. Between these groups, a large contingent of uncertain parishioners wavered, torn between mounting evidence and lifelong social connections. Social media amplified the conflict. Local Facebook groups buzzed with accusations and counter-accusations. The parish YouTube channel's comment section became so toxic that moderators shut it down. Anonymous accounts spread rumors about both David and Sarah, while others shared testimonies supporting their claims. The story began attracting attention from religious blogs and alternative news sites, though mainstream media remained suspiciously quiet. The diocese's official investigation team, led by Bishop Robert's hand-picked auditors, maintained a presence that seemed more focused on damage control than truth-seeking. Their questions often centered on David's psychological state and his mother's financial situation rather than the substantial evidence of financial misconduct. Church attendance dropped sharply, with many families choosing to worship at neighboring parishes until the situation resolved. Sunday collections dwindled, ironically making the church more dependent on the wealthy donors under investigation. The annual Christmas charity drive, usually a highlight of the parish calendar, became a battleground of competing fundraising efforts. The situation reached a critical point when the parish school board, heavily influenced by the Parker faction, suggested David should voluntarily transfer to another school for his own well-being. This proposal sparked a heated emergency meeting of parents, where economic divisions within the community became painfully apparent. Working-class parents shared stories of their own children being marginalized, while wealthy families defended the existing social hierarchy as traditional and necessary. Sarah found unexpected allies among local clergy from other denominations. A Baptist minister offered his church's facilities for a support group of affected families. A Methodist congregation took up a collection to help families struggling with lost jobs and opportunities. These gestures of interfaith solidarity highlighted how the scandal had transcended denominational boundaries to become a broader question of social justice. David's demeanor throughout these trials remained remarkably steady. He continued his altar boy duties when allowed, though Father Anderson increasingly found reasons to schedule others. During one particularly tense Sunday service, David looked directly at the priest during communion and said clearly, "Jesus is crying again, Father, but not just for the money anymore, for all the hurt people are causing each other." The comment sent shockwaves through the congregation and became a turning point for many undecided parishioners. The simple wisdom of a child's perspective cut through the complex adult rationalizations, forcing many to confront their own roles in perpetuating injustice. As Christmas approached, the strains within the community became physically visible. The traditional parish festivities split into separate celebrations. The Parkers hosted an exclusive heritage dinner at their mansion, while Sister Mary Catherine organized a fellowship supper in the church basement. The contrast between crystal champagne flutes and paper cups spoke volumes about the deep divisions money had created in a community supposedly united in Christ. The annual parish financial meeting, traditionally a routine affair sparsely attended, became the flashpoint that ignited long, simmering tensions. The church hall was packed to capacity on a cold January evening, with every faction of the divided congregation in attendance. The air crackled with tension as Father Anderson took his place at the podium. His usual commanding presence noticeably diminished. Janet Richardson chose this moment to make her move. Rising from her seat in the middle row, financial documents clutched in her trembling hands, she interrupted Father Anderson's opening prayer. "I have evidence." Her voice rang out, surprisingly strong, of systematic financial fraud spanning the last decade. The room erupted into chaos as she began projecting spreadsheets onto the wall behind the stunned priest. The numbers told a damning story. Millions in charitable donations had been diverted through a complex web of shell companies, all leading back to private accounts controlled by church leadership. Janet methodically outlined each transaction, her accountant's precision lending weight to every accusation. These signatures, she pointed, match exactly with what David described from his vision. James Parker, I attempted to seize control of the situation, his face flushed with rage. "This is slander. I'll have you all in court by morning," but his threats were drowned out by Tommy Rogers' father, who wheeled his son to the front of the room. "My boy needed a wheelchair," he shouted, "waving denied application forms while you were buying a yacht." Sister Mary Catherine, strategic as ever, had positioned allies throughout the crowd. One by one, they stood to share their stories. Mrs. Martinez spoke of being denied assistance for life-saving medication. Former shelter residents testified about programs shuttered despite abundant donations earmarked for their support. Each account corresponded perfectly with the financial records Janet had uncovered. Detective Cooper chose this moment to step forward, his police badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. "The Fraud Division has opened an official investigation," he announced, his voice cutting through the tumult. We have enough evidence to pursue criminal charges Father Anderson's face when Ashen as Cooper detailed the potential penalties for financial fraud and misuse of charitable funds. The confrontation reached its climax when David, who had been sitting quietly beside his mother, suddenly stood. The room fell silent as the small boy walked to the front, his presence commanding attention in a way that defied his years. "Jesus showed me something else," he said, his voice clear and unwavering. "He showed me the hidden room behind Father Anderson's office, where the real records are kept." Father Anderson's composure finally cracked. "That's impossible. No one knows about he caught himself, but too late." The admission hung in the air like a thunderclap. James Parker moved toward the exit, only to find his path blocked by several determined parishioners. Sarah Thompson watched with a mixture of pride and fear as her son continued speaking, describing in detail the location of documents that would confirm every accusation. Detective Cooper and 2 uniformed officers were already moving toward the priest's office, their footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. The meeting dissolved into controlled chaos as police began securing the premises. Elizabeth Parker's carefully maintained dignity crumbled as she watched her husband being questioned by officers. The middle-class families who had straddled the fence found their position untenable as evidence of their complicity in smaller schemes came to light. Through it all, David maintained the same serene expression he'd worn since his divine encounter. When reporters later asked about his calm during such a tumultuous scene, he simply replied, "Jesus told me the truth would hurt at first, but it had to come out for the church to heal." As the evening drew to a close, with police tape marking off sections of the church offices and parishioners huddled in shock groups, Sister Mary Catherine led a spontaneous prayer circle. "Let us pray," she began, "not for vengeance but for healing, not for punishment but for restoration." Even some of the staunchest defenders of the old regime found themselves drawn into the circle, their certainties shaken by the weight of undeniable evidence. The days following the confrontation transformed St. Michael's into a battlefield of shifting alliances and desperate power plays. Father Anderson, though under investigation, refused to step down voluntarily, citing canonical law and his 20-year tenure. The diocese, caught in a public relations nightmare, seemed paralyzed between protecting their interests and responding to mounting public pressure. James Parker, I launched a sophisticated counter-offensive from his law firm's offices. His legal team flooded the parish council with injunctions and threatened lawsuits against anyone who slandered church leadership. They crafted a narrative painting David's visions as the product of a troubled child's imagination, exploited by disgruntled parishioners for personal gain. Private investigators began digging into Sarah Thompson's past, looking for anything to discredit her and her son. Bishop Roberts finally arrived from the diocese, his presence adding another layer of complexity to the power dynamics. In private meetings with parish leaders, he proposed a compromise: Father Anderson would take a temporary leave of absence, while an internal church investigation was conducted, effectively burying the scandal in bureaucratic procedures. The parish council, traditionally a rubber stamp for Father Anderson's decisions, erupted into open warfare. The Loyalists, led by Elizabeth Parker, fought to maintain control of church committees and financial oversight. The Reformers, energized by the recent revelations, pushed for immediate changes in leadership and financial transparency. Meetings became so heated that Sister Mary Catherine had to station peacekeepers at the doors. David's role in the struggle took an unexpected turn when national religious media picked up the story. A video of him describing his heavenly vision went viral in Christian circles, drawing attention from larger churches and religious organizations. Some praised him as a modern-day prophet, while others condemned the entire situation as a symptom of moral decay. The power vacuum created by Father Anderson's weakened position attracted opportunists from every quarter. Visiting priests began showing up unannounced, each hoping to position themselves as potential replacements. Church politicians from the diocese circled like sharks, sensing an opportunity to advance their careers through the crisis. Sarah Thompson faced her own battles as pressure mounted to control her son. Social services received anonymous complaints about David's home life. The parish school's administration, still loyal to the old guard, began documenting every minor incident involving David, building a case for possible expulsion. The campaign of intimidation grew more sophisticated, with subtle threats replacing outright hostility. Detective Cooper's criminal investigation hit roadblocks as key documents mysteriously disappeared and witnesses suddenly became reluctant to testify. The Parkers' influence reached deep into local law enforcement and government offices, slowing the investigation to a crawl. Yet each obstacle seemed to confirm the truth of David's visions, as he had predicted attempts to hide the evidence. Sister Mary Catherine emerged as a stabilizing force, her quiet authority drawing support from both progressive and traditional factions. She organized prayer vigils that brought divided families together and established a transparency committee to review all church finances. Her greatest victory came when she convinced several wealthy donors unaligned with the Parkers to continue supporting the church's legitimate charitable works. The power struggle reached a critical point when Father Anderson attempted to reassert control by changing the locks on church offices and freezing all bank accounts. His actions backfired spectacularly when parish staff led by Mrs. Rodriguez staged a peaceful sit-in in the church sanctuary. The image of elderly parishioners praying the rosary while blocking access to the administrative offices became a powerful symbol of grassroots resistance. David watched these developments with the same otherworldly calm that had marked him since his experience. During a particularly contentious parish meeting, he suddenly spoke up, "Jesus didn't show me all this so we could fight each other. He showed me so we could fix what's broken." His words, delivered with childlike simplicity, cut through the adult machinations like a shaft of pure light. The struggle for St. Michael's soul continued, but the balance of power had shifted irreversibly. Each new revelation from the investigation confirmed another detail from David's vision, making it increasingly difficult for even skeptics to dismiss his experience as imagination. The old power structure was crumbling, but the shape of what would replace it remained uncertain. As we delve deeper into this powerful story of faith and redemption, your support through subscribing would mean everything to us. Each subscription helps us continue sharing these meaningful stories that touch hearts and inspire change in our communities. Join our growing family of believers. Let's continue with David's extraordinary journey. The first signs of organized retaliation came swiftly and ruthlessly. Sarah Thompson arrived home one evening to find an eviction notice taped to her apartment door. The building's owner, a shell company recently acquired by Parker Investment Group, had decided to renovate the entire complex. They gave her 30 days to leave in the middle of winter. David's situation at school deteriorated rapidly. His locker was vandalized with cruel messages calling him a liar and attention seeker. Teachers who had previously supported him suddenly found reasons to mark down his work. The school administration, heavily influenced by Parker family donations, began documenting every minor infraction, building a case for expulsion. Sister Mary Catherine faced ecclesiastical pressure from the diocese. Anonymous complaints about her disruptive influence appeared in her personnel file. Bishop Roberts summoned her for a private meeting, strongly suggesting a transfer to a remote parish would benefit her career. Her refusal led to threats of disciplinary action. The local media, finally breaking their silence, published a series of articles questioning David's mental health. The pieces, while carefully worded to avoid direct libel, painted a picture of a troubled child from a broken home, manipulated by adults with political agendas. Sarah recognized the writing style of Elizabeth Parker's cousin, a veteran journalist known for hit pieces. Detective Cooper found his investigation systematically obstructed. Search warrants were delayed, evidence disappeared from police storage, and witnesses suddenly became unavailable or changed their stories. His superiors, citing budget constraints, reassigned him to traffic duty. The message was clear: powerful people wanted this investigation buried. The parish itself became a battleground of whispered accusations and social ostracism. Families who supported David found their businesses losing contracts. Children were uninvited from birthday parties. The annual Charity Gala Committee, traditionally a marker of social status, quietly removed several vocal supporters from their lists. Mr. Jenkins, the elderly groundskeeper who had testified about document burning, suffered a suspicious break-in at his home. Nothing was stolen, but his carefully organized evidence files were destroyed. The next day, he found his beloved church gardens vandalized, decades of careful cultivation ruined overnight. Janet Richardson's accounting practice lost several major clients without explanation. Anonymous online reviews questioned her professional competence. Her husband's construction company suddenly found itself excluded from bidding on major projects. Their teenage daughter was removed from consideration for a prestigious scholarship previously promised by the Parker Foundation. The Thompsons' allies began falling one by one. Mrs. Rodriguez was fired for performance issues after 20 years of service. The youth minister who had supported David's account was transferred to another parish. Even Tommy Rogers' family, who had spoken out about the wheelchair funding, found their insurance coverage mysteriously denied for essential medical treatments. Through it all, David maintained an uncanny serenity that unsettled even his tormentors. When Madison Parker led a group of students in mocking him during lunch, he responded by sharing his sandwich with a new student who couldn't afford lunch money. "Jesus showed me that hurt people hurt others," he explained to his mother that evening. "They need love the most." Sarah watched her son with a mixture of pride and terror. Each morning brought new anxieties. Would this be the day they lost their home? Would David face more bullying at school? Would she find another job to replace the one she'd lost? Yet David's unwavering faith gave her strength, even as their world seemed to crumble around them. The pressure built like a volcano preparing to erupt, with David and Sarah at its center. Yet those seeking to silence them had underestimated the power of truth and the profound impact of a child's unshakable faith in divine justice. The crisis reached its nadir on a bitter February morning. Sarah and David returned from early Mass to find their apartment had been broken into. Their few valuable possessions were gone, including Sarah's mother's wedding ring and David's cherished Bible, a gift from Sister Mary Catherine. But the real damage was psychological. Photographs had been torn, David's school certificates shredded, and their walls spray-painted with vicious messages. That same morning, St. Michael's Cathedral suffered its own violation. Someone had broken in overnight, vandalizing the sanctuary and defacing the altar. The timing wasn't coincidental. It was the same day David was scheduled to give his testimony to state investigators. Local news outlets immediately linked the two incidents, implying that supporters of David had desecrated the church to create sympathy. Sister Mary Catherine received an official letter from the diocese, placing her under administrative review. The charges were vague but threatening disruption of parish harmony and failure to maintain proper spiritual guidance. Her access to church facilities was restricted, effectively cutting her off from her support network and the documents she'd been gathering. David's school situation reached a breaking point when he was accused of cheating on an important test. Despite his perfect academic record and multiple witnesses who saw him working independently, the administration moved to suspend him. The evidence was clearly fabricated, but the Parkers' influence ensured the decision stuck. The final blow came when Sarah lost her last remaining job. The small cafe that hired her, despite pressure not to, suffered a mysterious health code violation that forced its temporary closure. Without income, facing eviction, and watching her son's spirit being systematically crushed, Sarah felt her own faith wavering for the first time. Even their most steadfast supporters began to distance themselves, worn down by months of pressure and retaliation. The few remaining allies could only offer prayers and sympathy, their own resources exhausted by similar attacks. The Thompsons found themselves increasingly isolated, their world shrinking to the small space of their damaged apartment. David's health began to suffer. The strain of maintaining his peaceful demeanor in the face of constant harassment took its toll. He developed insomnia, his usual bright smile dimmed, and dark circles appeared under his eyes. Yet he refused to recant his testimony, saying simply Jesus knew this would happen. He said the darkness fights hardest just before the light wins. One particularly dark night, as Sarah sat among the ruins of their home trying to figure out their next move, David approached her with tears in his eyes. "Mom," he said, his voice trembling for the first time since his divine experience, "Jesus showed me something else in heaven. He said we had to go through this. He said sometimes you have to lose everything to see what really matters." The local homeless shelter, already overcrowded, offered them temporary accommodation, the very shelter that had been forced to reduce services due to the diverted church funds. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah as she and David settled into their small corner, their worldly possessions reduced to 2 backpacks of salvaged items. That night, huddled on a thin shelter mattress, Sarah held her son close and finally allowed herself to cry. David, showing wisdom far beyond his years, wiped her tears away and whispered, "Don't worry, Mom. Jesus told me this isn't the end of our story, it's just the part that makes the ending more beautiful." Their fall from grace seemed complete. The once respected members of St. Michael's community had become cautionary tales, their presence in the homeless shelter a warning to others who might consider challenging the established order. Yet in their darkest moment, as they had nothing left to lose, the stage was set for a revelation that would shake the foundations of not just St. Michael's, but the entire diocese. The turning point came from the most unexpected source. Father Michael Anderson, racked by guilt and declining health, suffered a severe heart attack during Sunday Mass. As he lay in the hospital, convinced he was facing his final judgment, he asked to speak with Bishop Roberts not as a colleague, but as a penitent in confession. What transpired in that hospital room would change everything. The bishop emerged visibly shaken, his usual composed demeanor cracked. After hours of private deliberation and numerous phone calls to the Vatican, he made an unprecedented decision. With Father Anderson's written permission, he would break the seal of confession for the first time in his 40-year ministry, citing grave circumstances affecting the entire church. The revelation came first to a hastily assembled meeting of church leaders. Father Anderson had confessed to decades of systematic fraud, not just at St. Michael's but throughout the diocese. The corruption went deeper than anyone had imagined, involving multiple parishes, fake charities, and a complex network of financial manipulation that made the previous accusations seem minor in comparison. More shocking still was the revelation about David's divine experience. Father Anderson, in what he believed were his final hours, admitted to being in his office the morning of David's collapse. Through his window, he had witnessed the boys' soccer game and subsequent fall. What he saw next defied explanation: a brilliant light surrounding David's unconscious body, and what appeared to be figures of light kneeling beside him. The priest's guilt, festering for months, finally broke him. Every detail David had revealed about the church's finances matched exactly with Father Anderson's confession. The confession included names, dates, account numbers, and most devastatingly, the location of encrypted files stored on multiple hard drives. Father Anderson had kept meticulous records as insurance against betrayal by his co-conspirators. These records implicated not just the Parkers, but dozens of prominent families across multiple parishes, revealing a decades-long scheme of tax evasion, money laundering, and charity fraud. Detective Cooper, reinstated to active duty by a police chief facing his own scrutiny, led a team to recover the hidden files. They found exactly what David had described in his vision: a false wall in Father Anderson's office concealing a small room filled with documents and digital records. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. As news of the confession spread, the carefully constructed facade of St. Michael's power structure crumbled. James Parker, attempting to flee the country, was detained at the airport. His wife Elizabeth, facing reporters outside their mansion, suffered a public breakdown, screaming about persecution before being led away by their lawyers. Their daughter Madison, watching her family's disgrace unfold on local news, finally broke down and admitted to orchestrating the campaign of bullying against David. Sarah and David, still living in the homeless shelter, learned of these developments from Sister Mary Catherine, who arrived breathless with the news. David listened calmly, then said something that gave them all chills. "Jesus showed me Father Anderson's heart would be the key. He said sometimes the truth has to come from the person who tried hardest to hide it." The national media descended on St. Michael's, but this time with a very different narrative. The story of a child's divine vision, initially dismissed as fantasy, gained powerful credibility through Father Anderson's deathbed confession. Religious leaders across denominations began speaking out about corruption in religious institutions, using St. Michael's as a cautionary tale. Father Anderson, having survived his heart attack but facing both criminal charges and canonical punishment, requested one final meeting with David and Sarah. In his hospital room, the once powerful priest broke down completely, begging forgiveness from the child whose vision had exposed his sins. David's response would be quoted in religious texts for years to come: "Jesus already forgave you, Father. He just needed you to forgive yourself so the truth could help others." The machinery of justice moved swiftly once Father Anderson's confession broke the dam of silence. State and federal investigators descended on St. Michael's, their search warrants extending far beyond the church itself. The investigation expanded to include tax fraud, money laundering, and misuse of charitable funds across multiple parishes in the diocese. The first indictment shocked even the most cynical observers. James Parker and 12 other prominent church members faced multiple federal charges. The evidence trail revealed a sophisticated criminal enterprise operating under the guise of religious charity. Bank records showed millions in donations diverted through a labyrinth of shell companies, eventually funding luxurious lifestyles while legitimate charitable causes went unsupported. Elizabeth Parker, facing her own legal troubles, made a desperate attempt to salvage her reputation by turning state's evidence. Her testimony implicated dozens more conspirators, including prominent politicians and business leaders who had used the church's charitable status to evade taxes and launder money. The scandal reached into every corner of local society, toppling pillars of the community one by one. The diocese underwent a complete restructuring under Vatican supervision. Bishop Roberts, though not directly implicated in the financial crimes, was forced to resign for his role in suppressing initial investigations. His replacement, a no-nonsense former prosecutor turned priest, implemented strict financial oversight measures across all parishes. Tommy Rogers finally received his wheelchair, along with specialized medical care funded by recovered assets. Mrs. Martinez and dozens of other community members denied assistance over the years saw their needs finally addressed. The homeless shelter where Sarah and David had taken refuge received full funding for expansion, with additional resources for job training and transitional housing programs. The parish school underwent its own revolution. The principal and several board members resigned in disgrace after evidence emerged of their role in persecuting David and other less privileged students. The new administration implemented strict anti-bullying policies and established a scholarship fund specifically for children from disadvantaged backgrounds. Sister Mary Catherine, fully vindicated, was appointed interim administrator of St. Michael's. Her first action was to establish a transparency committee composed of both religious and lay members, ensuring all financial decisions would face public scrutiny. She also organized a reconciliation program helping heal the deep divisions within the parish community. David and Sarah returned to their apartment, now protected by court order from any retaliatory eviction. Anonymous donations from ashamed wealthy parishioners helped them recover from their losses, though Sarah insisted most of the money go to helping other families affected by the church's previous corruption. Madison Parker, separated from her parents' influence for the first time, made a public apology to David during Sunday Mass. Her tearful admission of orchestrating the bullying campaign, followed by David's immediate and gracious forgiveness, became a powerful symbol of the healing possible within the community. The legal proceedings concluded with justice served on multiple fronts. Father Anderson, in exchange for his full cooperation, received a lenient sentence that included community service rather than prison time, though he was permanently removed from priestly ministry. The Parkers and their primary conspirators faced substantial prison terms and massive financial penalties, with the recovered funds directed to the charitable causes they had originally been intended to support. Most remarkably, the entire scandal led to national reforms in religious institutional oversight. The St. Michael's protocols became standard guidelines for financial transparency in religious organizations across the country. David's story, once dismissed as childish fantasy, was now studied in seminaries as a powerful reminder of the importance of maintaining ethical standards in religious institutions. The transformation of St. Michael's from a symbol of corruption to a model of reform brought an unexpected blessing. Membership actually increased. People drawn to the story of redemption and renewal found a revitalized community dedicated to genuine charitable work and spiritual growth. The once rigid social hierarchies dissolved, replaced by authentic fellowship across economic and social boundaries. 1 year after Father Anderson's confession, St. Michael's Cathedral hosted a special service of healing and reconciliation. The once divided congregation gathered under freshly restored stained glass windows, their colored light falling on faces both familiar and new. Sister Mary Catherine, now officially appointed as parish administrator, stood at the pulpit addressing a packed house. The physical transformation of St. Michael's was striking. The ornate marble floors that had consumed so much misappropriated funding were replaced with simple, dignified stone. The ostentatious decorations had given way to modest beauty, reflecting the parish's renewed focus on substance over appearance. The formerly exclusive reserved pews were gone, replaced by open seating that encouraged integration among all social classes. David, now 9 years old, had emerged from the ordeal with an otherworldly wisdom that drew people to him. He continued serving as an altar boy, but also took on a new role leading children's prayer groups where young parishioners could discuss their own spiritual experiences without fear of judgment. The children who had once bullied him now sought his friendship, drawn by his inexhaustible capacity for forgiveness. Sarah Thompson found herself in a position she'd never imagined. The parish council, restructured to include representatives from all economic backgrounds, elected her as their chairperson. Her experience of poverty and persecution, combined with her unwavering faith through adversity, made her uniquely qualified to help guide the church's renewed charitable mission. The recovered funds were systematically redirected to their intended purposes. The homeless shelter expanded its facilities and programs. A new medical assistance fund ensured no parishioner would ever again be denied critical health care. The school scholarship program, now named the Divine Truth Scholarship, provided opportunities for underprivileged students throughout the diocese. Former critics of David's vision became some of his strongest advocates. Mrs. Whitney, who had once dismissed him as an attention-seeking child, now led a weekly Bible study focusing on modern-day miracles and divine intervention. Even some of the convicted conspirators' family members, initially bitter about their relatives' downfall, began to see the events as necessary for spiritual renewal. Detective Cooper, his faith in justice restored, established a special task force dedicated to investigating financial crimes in religious institutions. His team conducted training sessions for church administrators across the country, using St. Michael's case as a powerful example of both corruption's dangers and redemption's possibility. The media narrative transformed completely. Reporters who had once questioned David's mental state now sought his insights on spiritual matters. Documentary filmmakers captured the story of St. Michael's transformation, highlighting how a child's pure faith had exposed corruption and catalyzed genuine reform. Most profoundly, the sense of community within St. Michael's deepened in ways that transcended mere social bonds. Wealthy parishioners who had once looked down on charity cases now worked alongside them in various outreach programs. The artificial barriers of class and status dissolved in the face of shared purpose and genuine spiritual connection. Sister Mary Catherine often reflected that the greatest miracle wasn't David's vision itself, but how it had transformed an entire community's understanding of faith and service. Sometimes she would say, God uses the smallest vessels to carry the largest truths. On David's 10th birthday, St. Michael's Cathedral witnessed something extraordinary. The boy who had shaken the foundations of the church with his divine vision stood before the congregation once again, but this time to share what he called the final part of Jesus' message. The part he'd been told to keep until the right moment. Jesus showed me more than just the wrong things, David began, his clear voice carrying to every corner of the hushed cathedral. He showed me what his church could become. He said the money and secrets weren't the real problem. The problem was that people had forgotten how to love each other the way he loves us. The transformation of St. Michael's had rippled far beyond its walls. Other churches across the country began adopting their transparency protocols and inclusive practices. The St. Michael's model became a case study in religious reformation, with delegations from various denominations visiting to learn from their experience. Sarah Thompson, watching her son address the congregation, reflected on their journey. The hardships they'd endured had given way to something beautiful, a genuine community where faith transcended social status. Her new position as director of the church's expanded charitable programs allowed her to ensure no family would face the struggles they had endured. Father Anderson, having served his sentence, found purpose in counseling other religious leaders who struggled with ethical challenges. Though no longer able to perform priestly duties, his story of confession and redemption brought hope to others facing similar moral crossroads. He attended services quietly in the back pews, his presence a living testament to the possibility of genuine change. The Parker family's story took an unexpected turn. Madison, deeply transformed by the experience, devoted herself to anti-bullying initiatives in schools. Her weekly letters to David from her parents' prison visitation spoke of gradual but profound changes in their perspectives. The family's fall from grace had paradoxically led them toward authentic spiritual growth. Sister Mary Catherine established a new ministry focused on spiritual authenticity and social justice, drawing participants from all walks of life. The program emphasized practical application of religious principles, ensuring that faith manifested in tangible actions to benefit the community. The cathedral itself became a symbol of renewal. The simple beauty of its restored interior attracted visitors from around the world, not for its grandeur but for the palpable sense of genuine spirituality it now housed. The garden, once a showcase of expensive landscaping, became a community vegetable patch that helped feed local families in need. David's final message to the congregation that day encapsulated the profound truth of their collective journey. Jesus told me that every church should be like a family where everyone belongs, no matter what. He said when we learn to see each other the way He sees us, that's when real miracles happen. The story of St. Michael's continues to evolve, but its central lesson remains constant authentic faith, expressed through a child's pure vision, has the power to transform not just institutions but human hearts. As Sister Mary Catherine often reminds newcomers, our greatest testimony isn't in our buildings or our programs, but in how we love one another. And so the light that once broke through the darkness of corruption continues to shine, not as a harsh exposing beam, but as a warm glow of genuine community and shared purpose. David's divine vision became not just a moment of revelation, but the beginning of an ongoing journey toward what a church and its people can truly become. If this story of faith, redemption, and divine truth has touched your heart, please consider supporting our team by subscribing to our channel. Your subscription helps us continue sharing powerful stories that inspire and transform lives. We'd love to hear your thoughts and emotions in the comments below. How has David's journey affected you? Don't forget to like and share this video with friends and family who might need this message of hope. Should we continue with part 2 of this extraordinary story? Let us know in the comments below. Together we can spread more stories of faith and miracles.